In today's truck world, everything is getting smaller. Smaller engines, more turbos, more hybrid systems, more complexity. Manufacturers keep telling us that downsizing is the future. So why did Ford go the complete opposite direction, right when naturally aspirated V8s looked like they were on the way out? Ford introduced something that shocked the industry. A brand new, old-school style 7.3-liter pushrod V8. They call it Godzilla. And here's the part they don't talk about enough. This engine wasn't built to impress on paper. It wasn't designed to win horsepower headlines. It was engineered to outwork, outlast, and outperform expectations in the real world. On the spec sheet, it makes 430 horsepower and 475 pound-feet of torque. Solid numbers, respectable numbers. But when you start looking deeper, those numbers don't tell the full story. Because what makes the 7.3L Godzilla different isn't just peak output. It's how it delivers that power. The torque comes in low. It stays flat. It feels effortless. When you're towing heavy, climbing grades, or hauling equipment, that's what matters. And here's the real question. Why would Ford release a massive naturally aspirated V8 in an era dominated by turbochargers and electrification? The answer is simpler than you think. Truck buyers, especially in America, still care about durability. They care about long-term reliability. They care about engines that can run hard for 200,000 miles without becoming a maintenance nightmare. Turbo engines can make impressive power, but they also add heat, pressure, and complexity. More parts, more potential failures, more expensive repairs. Ford understood something most automakers ignored. There is still a huge demand for a tough, simple, high-displacement gasoline engine that can take abuse day after day without drama. And that's exactly what the 7.3L Godzilla was built to be. But here's where it gets interesting. Many owners and tuners believe this engine is stronger than Ford officially claims. Underrated? Maybe. And if that's true, the real story behind the Godzilla V8 might be bigger than anyone expected. So let's talk about what Ford doesn't highlight in the commercials. The 7.3L Godzilla isn't some recycled design pulled off a shelf. It was engineered from the ground up with one clear mission: survive real truck duty in America. That starts with the foundation. A cast iron block, not aluminum, not lightweight for the sake of efficiency. Cast iron for strength, for rigidity, for heat control under load. That alone tells you this engine wasn't built for bragging rights. It was built for punishment. Then you've got aluminum cylinder, heads to balance weight and manage combustion temperatures. Inside, oil-cooled pistons help control heat when the engine is working hard. Towing, hauling, sitting in traffic on a 100-degree job site. This isn't accidental over-engineering. It's intentional. And here's where things get interesting. Ford went with a cam and block pushrod design. Some critics called it old-fashioned, said dual overhead cams were more modern, more advanced. But in heavy-duty applications, simpler often wins. Fewer moving parts, less valve train complexity, easier maintenance, lower long-term cost. For fleet operators and contractors, that matters more than flashy engineering diagrams. But here's something most people miss. The Godzilla also uses variable valve timing and a variable displacement oil pump. That means it's not just a brute force engine. It adapts. It manages oil pressure based on demand. It optimizes airflow across RPM ranges. It's simple where it needs to be, and smart where it counts. And that combination is rare. Because while other manufacturers chased smaller, turbocharged engines that rely on boost to feel strong, Ford built an engine that doesn't need forced induction to move serious weight. The torque curve is broad and usable. It doesn't spike and fall off. It stays consistent. That's why drivers say it feels calm, even when pulling. 10,000 pounds or more. No drama, no screaming RPM, just steady, confident power. And here's the part that raises eyebrows. When independent dyno tests started surfacing, some builds were putting down numbers that suggested the factory rating might be conservative. Very conservative. So now the question shifts. Did Ford underrate the 7.3L on purpose? Because if this engine has more headroom than advertised, that changes everything. Now this is where the story really takes off. Because once the 7.3L Godzilla hit the streets, it didn't just stay in work trucks. It exploded in the aftermarket world. Ford made a bold move by offering the 7.3 as a crate engine through Ford Performance. And that's when builders, tuners, and racers started paying attention. Hot rodders began swapping it into classic F100s. Builders dropped it into Fox body Mustangs. Custom shops started fitting it into Broncos, drag builds, even Crown Victorias. Why? Because this engine responds to mods in a way most modern engines don't. Simple bolt-ons, intake, headers, tune. Suddenly, you're knocking on the door of 500 horsepower naturally aspirated. At a cam upgrade, the numbers climbed fast, and when builders started adding boost, that's when things got serious. Supercharged setups have pushed the Godzilla past 800 horsepower on stock-style bottom ends. Some race builds have gone even further. That's not normal for a factory work truck engine. That's overbuilt territory. And that's why more and more tuners are starting to compare it to GM's legendary GM LS engine platform, and an engine known for being durable, affordable, and ridiculously adaptable. That comparison isn't small praise, because what made the LS famous wasn't just power, it was headroom. It was reliability under stress. It was how forgiving it was when you pushed it. And the 7.3L Godzilla is showing those same traits. Engine builders consistently say the internals feel understressed from the factory. The block is stout, the rotating assembly is strong, the valve train is straightforward and easy to modify. In other words, Ford didn't build this thing right at the edge of its limits. They left room, and that brings us back to the big question. If Ford engineered this engine with that much margin, why rate it at 430 horsepower? Why not advertise the ceiling instead of the floor? Because once you realize how much potential is hidden inside this engine, it stops looking like just another gas V8. It starts looking like something Ford might have intentionally held back. So what happens when you take all that engineering and put it to work in the real world? This is where the 7.3L Godzilla earns its reputation. In trucks like the Ford F-250 Super Duty and Ford F-350 Super Duty, owners consistently report the same thing. It feels relaxed, even under load. Tow 10,000 pounds. Tow more. Climb long grades in the summer heat. The engine doesn't feel strained. It doesn't feel like it's fighting to stay in its power band. The torque is right there, low in the RPM range, steady and predictable. Paired with Ford's 10-speed automatic, the shifts are smooth and controlled. There's no frantic gear hunting, no constant screaming at redline, just calm, confident pulling power. And here's something that surprises a lot of buyers. Many fleet operators are choosing the 7.3 gas over diesel, not because it tows more than diesel, but because it tows enough without the added complexity. No turbo failures, no diesel exhaust fluid systems, no expensive emissions hardware that can shut a truck down unexpectedly. For contractors and small business owners, downtime is money. Simplicity matters. Fuel economy? No one expects miracles from a 7.3-liter V8, but unloaded highway, numbers in the mid-teens are common. Under heavy towing, it stays consistent instead of dropping off. A cliff like some smaller turbo engines do when boost is constantly required. And that consistency is part of the hidden story. This engine wasn't built to win MPG competitions. It was built to be predictable, durable, repeatable. That's why it's developed a cult following so quickly. In an era where engines are becoming smaller, more pressurized, and more complicated, the Godzilla represents something different. Big displacement, natural aspiration, mechanical honesty. So here's the final question. Did Ford underrate it? When you look at the dyno results, the aftermarket headroom, the real-world durability, the calm performance under stress, it certainly feels like Ford left something in reserve. Maybe to protect other engine options, maybe to guarantee longevity, or maybe because they knew the truck community would figure it out anyway. Either way, the 7.3L Godzilla isn't just another V8. It's proof that in America, torque still matters. And sometimes simple still wins.